The Black Talk Radio Network is made possible in part with help from the Black Talk Media Project, a North Carolina-based nonprofit engaged in the production and distribution of independent digital black media. Find out more by going to blacktalkradionetwork.com or blacktalkmediaproject.org and look for the menu tab, Crowdfunding Black Media. Black Talk Media Project, helping to provide you with new black media for the new millennium. And opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Good evening. This is Onaja Maweed, co-host of Race Treaty, that comes to you every Friday evening between the hours of 9 and 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are pleased to be a conduit, not necessarily the voice of the people, but a conduit of the voice of the people. To speak about our concerns, to speak about our demands, to speak about our progress, to speak about our future, to speak about our people. And for the next year, and probably long after that, we'll be presenting programs inside of what is called the International Decade for People of African Descent. In that, this program is dedicated to, in particular, the International Covenant to eliminate racism, but more broadly to all the international covenants and maybe even some that need to be drafted to protect our identity, our rights, and our future, and indeed our children. So what is this international decade? The United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2015 to 2024 as the International Decade for People of African Descent, Resolution 68/237, citing the need to strengthen national, regional, and international cooperation in relation to the full employment of economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights by people of African descent and their full and equal participation in all aspects of society. As proclaimed by the General Assembly, the theme of the decade, People of African Descent, the theme is recognition, justice, and development. Truly some goals that we can line up around. The main objectives of the International Decade include promote respect, protection, and fulfillment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by people of African descent as recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Promote a greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse heritage, culture, contribution of people of African descent to the development of societies and certainly of the world. Adapt and strengthen national, regional, and international legal frameworks according to the Durban Declaration and Program of Action and the International Covenant on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and to ensure their full and effective implementation, to name a few. So I'm dedicating this program to our beloved sister ancestor, Afeni Shakur, who lived probably every aspect of the lives that every black woman on the planet has lived. I mean, the woman has been any place you have seen black women, she was there. Her life was a life that was truly an example of being a queen and going to the bottom of society and raising herself up again. Indeed, with children as well, and of course, the world knows her mainly through her son Tupac Shakur. So this program is dedicated to her. And a few weeks ago, for those who did not listen or did not hear our first rendition of Blueprint for Black Women, their work around Black Women's Truth and Reconciliation Tribunal, we did that back in April, and this is a continuation of that show. And to read how this event, which you're going to hear tonight, or part of the event, was actually coined. This is on the occasion of the United Nations International Decade of People of African Descent. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the cooperation of the UN Department of Public Information and Black Women's Blueprint and support of UN Women invites you to a special event on recognition, justice, and development. Women of African descent at the intersection of race and gender. This UN event was held February the 29th, April 2016, from 11 to 12:30 p.m. So you're going to hear the moderator of the program, let me see if I can find her name, she is the president of the U.S. Human Rights Network. So I'm looking at the program, and her name is not listed here for some strange reason, but it will come up in the broadcast. So we're going to now play a clip from that, and intermittently I will be pausing that the video and giving some commentary, and we'll do that until the end of the program. So we'd like to welcome you, our new listeners, certainly valuing our old listeners, and ask all of you to still go out and get some more listeners so we can be in this international conversation on what recognition and development. So here we go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to this really critical discussion this morning: recognition, justice, and development. Women of African descent at the intersection of race and gender. So, we've come together this morning in observance of the International Decade for People of African Descent. This decade embodies a period of time that is full of promise for the world community to come together with people of African descent to take clear steps to acknowledge and address the present-day consequences of the crimes of slavery, the slave trade, and colonialism on people of African descent, to recognize and pay due to the myriad of contributions and the resilience of people of African descent, and to advance a full spectrum of human rights for people of African descent. As we know from experience, when it comes to discussions like this and decisions that shape critical world issues, women are too often excluded. So our event today was organized to commemorate women of African descent, that is, as equal and full participants in the planning of our collective destiny, and to acknowledge the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination that we face as women of African descent. So we are here this morning commemorating women of African descent as leaders, as survivors, as workers, as employers, as creators, as daughters, mothers, sisters, friends, and yes, lovers. It is for this reason that I am so thankful to the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN Department of Public Information, and the Black Women's Blueprint for organizing this event with the support of UN Women. I would especially like to thank and recognize Martina Donlan and Brigitta Uri from the UN Department of Public Information, Kelly Onigba, Faraz Matagedi, and Nanan Vashik from the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to Frederica Steins and Farah Tanis from Black Women's Blueprint. We thank you for your work, and we thank and are so honored to have the esteemed panel of speakers that we have today. And so, without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Malika Miller, who has graciously agreed to start our day with a blessing of a song.
Thank you, guys. I want to say, first of all, it's such an honor to be here. And I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to sing before you guys. Now, I'm originally from Arkansas. How many of you guys know where Arkansas is? Thank you. And I have to ask that question because I've been asked, are there black folks from Arkansas? I'm like, yes, here I am. And growing up in Arkansas, I went to a small country church. And in those churches, we sang gospel music. And when we sang with heartfelt depth because of the issues that they were going through. And today, I want you to understand that this is not a performance. I want you to sing with me because I'm a teacher also, so I'm going to invite you to join. And I want you to feel the experience of what we're about to go through as we sing gospel songs. You guys ready for that? All right, so the first song, I'm just going to sing this one song this morning right now. It's called, hello? Testing? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, for me to hold it? Oh, okay, thank you. All right. All right, this works. All right, so it's called I Know I've Been Changed. Now, I want to go through the chorus because I want you guys to join in on the chorus with me, okay? So it says, and listen, and I want you to repeat after me after I sing it for you. It says, I know I've been changed, oh glory. I know I've been changed, hey glory. I know I've been changed. You see the angels in heaven done sign my name. Oh, okay, woo, y'all know the song. All right. Give your hand. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sing an intro. And when I point to you, you know when you come in. All right? I know I've been changed. Hey, glory. No, I've been changed. Hey, glory. No, I've been changed. You see the angels in heaven done sign my name. I know I've been been changed. Hey, glory, I know I've been changed. Hey, glory, I know I've been changed. You see the angels in heaven done sign my name. Let's sing it. I know I've been changed. Hey, glory, I know I've been changed. Hey, glory, I know I've been changed. You see the angels in heaven done sign my name. Well, if you don't believe that I have been redeemed, oh Lord, the angels in heaven done sign my name. Well, follow me down to that Jordan stream. Oh Lord, the angels in heaven done sign my name. Oh, I know I've been changed. Oh, glory, I know I've been changed. Hey, glory, I know I've been changed. You see the angels in heaven done sign my name. Well, I stepped in that water and the water was cold. You see the angels in heaven done sign my name. Well, it chilled my body, but not my soul. Oh Lord, the angels in heaven done sign my name. Oh, I know I've been changed. Oh, glory, I know I've been changed. Hey, glory, I know I've been changed. You see the angels in heaven done sign my name. Say it one more time. Oh, I know I've been changed. Oh, glory, I know I've been changed. Hey, glory, I know I've been changed. You see the angels in heaven sign my name. Amen.
Now that's the way to start an event. Thank you, Miss Miller. Thank you. So, now that she's paved the way, I'd love to invite Ms. Sharif, the Deputy Head of the Office of the High Commissioner in New York, to share some opening remarks.
Dear friends, colleagues, and activists, I'm really, truly delighted to be here with you today, and I don't think we could have had a more unique and better start for this discussion than we have now. It's also rare that I see the room so filled with enthusiasm, passion, and really interest, people who are interested in coming to hear what we're going to talk about. And I think it's so important we're here together, because women of African descent are diverse groups in terms of their history, experiences, and identities. The circumstances in which they live and the problems they face may differ from country to country and region to region. However, whether as descendants of the victims of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, or as more recent migrants, refugees, or asylum seekers, women of African descent endure compounded discrimination based on their gender, ethnicity, and social status, which must be urgently addressed. And in that sense, I thank you for taking the time, for being here to join us in this urgent action and recognizing the urgency for action. Because the reality is that a girl of African descent is less likely to go to a quality school and have a university degree than a man. If she does make it to school yet comes from a poor family, she's more likely to drop out and find herself in a low-wage job. As a legacy of slavery, she may find herself in a role of servitude as a domestic worker. At this job, she will receive much lower wages than both men of African descent and other women in the same location. Her skin color may pose problems for her obtaining housing, and she will be forced to live in areas with lack of infrastructure and all too evident crime. And in that neighborhood, she's more likely to face violence, including domestic violence and even femicide. And it is likely she will be reluctant to report any of these problems to law enforcement officers or institutions because of fear of inaction or indifference or discrimination by authorities. There will be obstacles to this girl enjoying access to the full range of reproductive and health rights, creating higher rates of maternal mortality and forced sterilization. She may have an early pregnancy with little support from either the father or the family and end up heading a low-income household alone. And her history will likely repeat. And here, as a mother of a beautiful 4-year-old biracial daughter, I'm scared. Could it be that my little Miata might have different opportunities, might face discrimination in a way that I've never experienced? I don't want that to happen. And it mustn't happen. But yet, the chances that a girl of African descent will reach a position of political power still remain slim. In 2007, a mere 0.03% of legislators in Latin America were women of African descent, yet they represent 1/6 of the population. We cannot accept that the life of a child should be predetermined by the color of her skin or her gender. I want my daughter to be as proud as she is of being Liberian as she is of being from Finland. That's what it's about. She needs to own herself, own both parts of her lives. But here let's make it clear that it is the states that bear the primary responsibility to uphold core human rights principles of equality and non-discrimination. It is states that need to address gender and racial inequality as priorities and implement with urgency international human rights obligations that they have already undertaken anyway. All the governments, or the majority of governments in the world have ratified the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, or the International Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and commitments made in Durban as well. Yet, it is civil society that is here at large today to try and push for these commitments to become a reality. Let's keep the momentum that we've created by the International Decade for People of African Descent, and let's push our governments to tackle these injustices. Before I conclude, I just briefly mention the 3 themes of the decade, namely recognition, justice, and development, because it's meant to guide our work, guide our advocacy, and guide our actions for the decade to come. First, the theme of recognition. It should lead states to acknowledge problems faced by people of African descent. Full stop. We can't tackle a problem if we don't acknowledge it, right? States can tackle inequality within societies only if they admit that certain people are being discriminated against and treated unfairly. And the situation of women of African descent in many cases remains still really invisible. And one of the reasons is because we don't have enough data to prove. We know it's happening, but we can't prove it in statistics. So let's make sure that we make an effort to have this kind of disaggregated statistics that will show us the way where we need to act. And recognition also means acknowledging the contribution to society of people of African descent. The list of women of African descent who've achieved greatness in science, in politics, sports, arts, on a daily basis, people in this room, is great, but it's not known enough. On justice, the second theme, we need to step up efforts to combat impunity for racial discrimination, equal access to justice and protection of the law at all stages of law enforcement must be achieved. Nobody will disagree with that, but in reality it's not happening. We need a judicial culture, because it's not only about changing the institutions or the laws, it's about changing a culture, a mindset. It needs to be a judicial culture that is tolerant of difference and diversity, but fiercely intolerant of bigotry, prejudice, and sexism.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Yeah, but on my way home, yeah.
Black Talk Radio since 2008, providing new black media for the masses.
This is Onaja Weed, co-host of Race Treaty, that comes to you every Friday between 9 and 10 Eastern Standard Time. And those who may be just listening, just coming on to the program tonight, you've heard the first part of a program that was, when was it? April 29th, where a number of women from actually around the world came together to celebrate, commemorate the International Decade of African People, and particularly looking at African women, women of African descent, at the intersection of race and gender, and of course, from the themes of recognition, justice, and development. So if we look at those themes, we find them to be quite appropriate. Recognition first as human beings. We start there because it was with the intent of denying the humanity of African people that gave Europeans the permission to treat us less than human. Now, this is of course, after they had treated themselves in a manner that was less than human. So we have to understand how Europeans treated each other in Europe before they even came to Africa or India or America for that matter. So we're talking about a people who had engaged in the abuse of their children, the rape of their women, denouncing and marginalization of their women, and certainly creating hierarchies of class through systems of oppression. And of course, we can see that in terms of the way in which the economic systems, with the knights, with the lords, with the kings and the queens, that whole hierarchy was put in place, and it got exported throughout the world through the current systems. So when we talk about recognitions, we're saying first and foremost to recognize African people, in this particular instance, as humans. From that, place that into current political economic terms, which means we're living in a world through which nation states have been developed. And as a result of this nation state construction, how then do people of African descent who find themselves underneath these European nation states, how do we find them in those places and to promote their development, knowing quite well those who have somewhat control of state apparatuses? I'm particularly talking about the Caribbean at this time and talking about Africa at this time. We're still pretty much talking about neo-colonial states where their economy or their politics is controlled externally someplace else, even though they have a flag and they have an anthem, but they're not controlling the economy. Why? Because they don't determine the negotiations. They don't have the ability to negotiate how much their cocoa was going to get paid for in the world market. They don't even own the diamonds in South Africa. They're in partnership with De Beers. So you're still talking about an arrangement, even when you have the image of some level of self-determination, but it's not full, it's not complete, because we're still in the state of neocolonialism. So this recognition is recognizing African people as Africans, as humans, recognize their status in their political, economic places where they find themselves, and then being able to hold on to the levers of principles, of values, of our human rights treaties that would give them some level of self-determination, some level of pulling themselves up. And that will has to be, of course, morphed into justice. What rights do they have in terms of making allegations? What bodies will hear their claims, will adjudicate and actually provide justice. And we have to have this in every place we find ourselves, on the local level, on the state level, on like the state of New York, and then of course the federal level in terms of a nation-state apparatus. And in that discussion, we also must differentiate not a nation. America is not a nation. It's a multinational nation under the guise of nation state, so that the white ethnicity can actually usurp the reins of state power and use it as a way to make African people as a nation invisible. So if we choose the thinking of Yusuf Klein in terms of national minority, state and international laws that will apply to us, or if we go to the other extreme, and define ourselves as a nation, looking at the work of Imario Bedelli in the Republic of New Africa, whichever one we choose, and we have to have a choice, we have to have a plebiscite, that's the way in which we're going to have our group rights acknowledged, is through application of international law and seeing justice for the purpose of what? For the purpose of development. What type of development? Total 360 degrees development. Mental, physical, spiritual, societal. Every way in which humans develop on this planet, we have a right to that development. And all our efforts must be geared in that way. So this first part of the program, you've heard different speakers addressing those themes. And now we're going to return back to April 29th, Recognition, Justice, Development, Women of African Descent at the Intersection of Race and Gender.
And women of African descent who are living in poverty must have access to pro bono legal services so that they can call for help when they need it. And finally and thirdly, we need to more effectively integrate human rights and equality into all approaches to development. You know, we're all gearing up to implementing the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. They give us good hooks for our work, but at the same time, integration of a gender perspective and taking into account multiple forms of discrimination that affect women and girls is a prerequisite for sustainable development. And again, data will help us to do this. Under these Sustainable Development Goals, we committed to achieve a world in which every woman and every girl enjoys full gender equality, pledging to leave no one behind. But the compounded discrimination faced by women must be maybe the starting point of our work. The SDGs include important commitments to disaggregate data on race and ethnicity. And this reliable data, as I already mentioned, is essential for us to better understand the realities of women of African descent and adopt differentiated approaches in public policies that provide adequate solutions. It's not one solution fits all, that's for sure. And all of this will only be possible if our efforts aim at achieving both formal and substantive equality, if we challenge discriminatory laws, social norms, and stereotypes, and if we reverse the unequal distribution of power, resources, and opportunities. Finally, and we address the structural barriers that perpetuate inequalities and disparities. I thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Ms. Sharif, and thank you to the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for being one of the organizers of this event. I'll now like to invite Ms. Razavi, who is the Chief of Research and Data at UN Women, and also one of the organizers of this event, to share some opening remarks.
Good morning. It's lovely to be in this room, and it's lovely to hear the passion and the claim making for justice and for equality. I think we need to have more gatherings of this nature and of this level of passion and commitment in the UN to make this organization what it was set up to be. So I look forward to being in meetings such as this more often. Let me first begin by thanking all the organizers of this event, in particular Black Women's Blueprint. As UN Women, we're honored and privileged to have been asked to be supporting this event, and I'm very happy to be with all my sisters and brothers in this room. Also, I would like to thank our sister UN agencies, OHCHR and DPI, for having done all the hard work that it takes to bring an event like this together. Now, I will want to keep my remarks very brief, because my dear colleague from OHCHR has already spelled out a lot of very important issues, and also because I want to leave as much time as possible to our distinguished speakers who are sitting on this panel, and I want to hear from them. But let me just say a few words about UN Women. 3 points that I'm going to say about how the issues that are being discussed in this room resonate with what we try to do, and also to highlight some of the ways in which what you do should be kind of guiding us in the work that we do. Now, the subject of the conference is extremely important to what UN Women is supposed to be about, what our mandate is. Our mandate is gender equality and women's empowerment, and it's a universal mandate. We keep on saying that. What is that universalism? What does it mean? It first of all means that it's not just about poor countries, about developing countries, it's about the world, and that includes also so-called developed countries. We know that inequalities and injustices of different kinds, racial injustice, gender injustice, and other kinds of injustice are as present and vibrant in poor countries as they are in very rich countries. This is an important reality that the UN needs to be also aware of. It means also, universalism also means recognizing that inequalities on the basis of gender always intersect with other kinds of inequalities, with racial inequalities, with ethnic inequalities, with socioeconomic inequalities, with inequalities on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, to just name a few of the important axes of discrimination and inequality in which women's lives are defined and shaped. There is no homogeneous category called women. Women belong to different social groups, and that has a very important implication, and it shapes their experiences of gender injustice. But also, if we are to really leave no one behind, we need a kind of universalism that is not blind to difference. A universalism that is aware of inequalities in people's lives, that recognizes different axes of discrimination, and also a universalism that is aware of history, of slavery, of colonialism, of the slave trade, and other ways in which our lives have been shaped. And history is not something that we forget about and move on and is only in textbooks. Unfortunately, it shapes the structures within which we live. There's a lot of continuity between the past and our present. And if rights are to be recognized and rights are to be enjoyed, we need to be aware of the way in which those structural inequalities do not create a level playing field. That's a very important point that we need to bear in mind. My second point, referring to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, to which nearly all countries are signatories and have ratified the convention. It recognizes that formal equality is not sufficient. Having the laws is a great step forward, but it's not enough. It needs to go way beyond that in order to enable what CEDAW refers to as substantive equality. That is an equality of outcomes, an equality that means everyone can enjoy their rights. Social rights, economic rights, civil rights, political rights, and many other rights. It means also that the barriers to having these rights enjoyed have to be removed, and that duty falls on the state. The state is the main duty bearer. It should respect rights, it should protect people from discrimination by third parties, but also it has the duty of fulfilling rights. If markets cannot do their job, then it's up to the state to provide the services, the resources, in order to enable everyone universally to enjoy those rights. And that takes me to my third point, which is about what can policy do? Governments make policies, yes they do, and those policies are supposed to address a number of important issues that affect people's ability to enjoy their rights, affect the ability of women of African descent, of women from socioeconomic backgrounds that are disadvantaged, of women from different groups that belong to that society to be able to enjoy their rights. That means that the rights have to be recognized in law, but it has to go beyond that. There has to be recognition in terms of social norms. There has to be disarticulation of stereotypes. There needs to be that recognition of equal rights for everyone. But also, going beyond recognition, the state has the duty to provide the resources and the opportunities and guarantee that everyone can have access to a decent job. Every child can have access to not just education, but a quality education. That women can have the right to access care services for their children, for other people for whom they have to care, in order to be able to do other things, to hold on to jobs that provide a decent income, and to have access to a social protection that would enable them to live their elderly years in security. And finally, in order to make all this happen, we need not only recognition and redistribution, but also voice and participation. And this is where you all come in and play a very important part. Yes, we need to have elections that are fair. We need to have the population represented in our parliaments. We need to have parliaments that really represent the entire population. But beyond that, we need to have civil society, trade unions, other forms of organizations of civil society that are able to hold the state to account, to voice and articulate their needs and their rights, and to be able to hold the state to account. Now that's what we call a really important way in which society and state need to be articulated. And civil society plays a critical role in that interface. On that note, I would like to finish and hand over to our dear moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Razavi. And so now it is my pleasure to invite the third speaker who will be giving opening remarks, Ms. Farah Tanith, who is the co-founder
This is Onaja Maweed, Race Treaty, and we're listening to excerpts from the program that was on April 29th, Recognition, Justice, and Development, Women of African Descent, and the Intersection of Race and Gender. And this last clip, we were listening to Ms. Razavi, who is the chief of UN Women Data and Research Unit. And she spoke to the themes by pointing to gender equality and how can that be obtained. She went on to speak about the UN Declaration for Women, and how inequality is pointed out as something to be addressed. And she also said in that it's the state's responsibility to enforce and ensure equality for women, particularly if market forces don't put that in place. And certainly market forces has one goal only, and that is profit, not people. And then the third point she pointed out was policy that should be not only, again, orchestrated, initiated by the state, but it also requires that policy should be inclusive in law as well as social norms. So when we speak about social norms, what we're saying that African women have a right to be natural in the form in which the Creator said, this is who you are and this is the beauty that I want you to represent. And we know that African women have been fired from their positions because they chose not to conform to a European standard of straightening their hair. As the sisters in Cuba say, they refuse to colonize their hair. And in that refusal to colonize their hair, many African women have been fired, have been denied promotion, and rightly just ostracized. So social norms is people being able to express who they are in a natural way in a way that allows them to appreciate themselves, their phenotypes, their cultures, their way of life, which, of course, was a target of destruction, so that the colonializers were able to dissuade them from their own sense of humanity and therefore identity, purpose, and direction. And she went on to make a very important point, and this is the point of this program, and that is, she said that not only must there be redistribution of resources, there must be voice and participation from civil society, from women, but from civil society. So yes, women must participate in their own liberation, as we all must do, but it also saying that those of us, the men, must support the women in their quest for liberation. Rape should not be the purview of women to solve because it's a human problem. Therefore, the discrimination and inequality that women face is not for them to solve, it's a human problem. So I'm particularly calling on black men to stand up for their women and to participate in an anti-rape campaign and to participate in the liberation of their women so that women can have their full expression. It's been said, if you educate a man, you educate a person, but if you educate a woman, you educate a nation, because women, they are the caretakers of our children. So we're going to continue this program. I'm not sure if we're going to continue it next week or not. My intention is to be at the Left Forum that's being held in New York City at John Jay College, which is a college of the New York City university system. There you have activists coming from all over the world. Probably majority will be coming from the United States, and they're looking at some very critical issues. And it's our hope that that we'll be able to have interviews with individuals who attended the program, or even some of the conference or either conference organizers or workshop leaders. This is our hope to put that on next week. By chance, if we're not able to do that, more likely than not, we'll be continuing with this particular track of recognition, justice, and development, women of African descent at the intersection of race and gender, that was held on April the 29th at the United Nations at the headquarters in New York, New York. So this is Onaje Mweed, a co-host of Race Treaty, thanking you for tuning in tonight, asking you to listen to this broadcast certainly every week, and spread the word to let folks know that it's here and this is your station. We are no more than a host of your conversations and the things that you need to be said to each other. Why? Because we agree with the last speaker that it is about creating a voice. It is about creating, and that voice is to give us full participation in our liberation, in our development, and the transformation of the world. The world will go as African people go, for all the reasons that you know that's true. So this is Onaje Mweed, co-host of Race Treaty, thanking you for tuning in, asking you to do the same each and every Friday. And if not, be sure to check out our archives. So we would like to thank Brother Scotty Reed for all his technical expertise and putting all of this together and holding us together. And we look forward to talking to everyone next week. And have a good night.